17th ranked USC Trojans travel to play the 8th ranked Oregon Ducks in what is essentially a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game play-in game. If Michigan beats Ohio State, the winner of this game will go to Indianapolis most likely, based on the combined conference opponents' win percentage for the Trojans and the Ducks, which is higher than for the Wolverines and the Buckeyes, who the winner of this game will be tied with if Michigan wins out and beats Ohio State, who, look, is going to beat Rutgers by 50. And the winner of this game gets to play their biggest rival the following weekend, who they both outmatch in a way that cannot be described. Like, USC is dramatically better than UCLA. Washington's offense sucks at scaling against great defensive fronts. Oregon is one of those. This is a huge game. We're going to be doing several videos on it. Oregon is favored, again, by 8.5, 9.5. Lines creeped up to 10.5 at some places, and I have a very strong read on this game. College football is in attendance for this 3:30 p.m. Eastern time game on CBS. It'll be a 12:30 p.m. local time kickoff for both teams in the Pacific time zone. 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Oregon at 9-1, 6-1 in conference play, and USC at 8-2, 6-1 in conference play. Let's start off by taking a look at the visitor schedule for the Trojans. USC, outside of losing to Illinois and Notre Dame and playing a little bit sketchy on the road against Nebraska and actually sketchy against Iowa at home, they have looked ridiculously good when all things are clicking. And what they've been able to do against Nebraska and Iowa, where they were not clicking on all cylinders and yet they found ways to win, has impressed me. I do believe pretty strongly that Lincoln Riley and USC are heading in the right direction, and that next year, and especially 2 years down the road, they will be a consistent top 10 team that will be competing for national championships. This is a program that for so long, whether it was under Clay Helton or Lane Kiffin, or in the first few years of the Lincoln Riley era outside of his first year, where there was a bit of mirage of championship caliber genes, but that quickly faded away in 23 and 24, where USC's had to suffer being a blue blood and kind of living in its own shadow, in a sense, and not being able to live up to it, and having plenty of dysfunction behind the scenes, being out recruited in their own state. And Riley, both off the field and on the field, is beginning to fix these things rather slowly. And of course, you'd prefer it if you fix these things in year 2 instead of year 4, but some people have to learn it the hard way. And I think he has. The defense is getting better. It's actually improved over the past few weeks. Learned some lessons, I believe, from that Notre Dame game. And the offense has steadily remained pretty admirable, even as it's entered Big Ten play. Had to play a good Michigan defense, and they tore them apart. Had to play a good Notre Dame defense, and they had opportunities to score in the 30s and win that game. They were able to do just enough to beat Nebraska, just enough to beat an Iowa defense that's flirting with the top 5. This is a huge game for Lincoln Riley. It's one of the bigger games of his tenure. I don't think it is a game that will get him fired, for example, where if he loses this game, we can sit back and make a prediction of, well, this is the game that got Lincoln Riley fired. He won't be, but it shows he can't break through. No, but a win here would mean so much in the sense that beating Oregon on the road, given where Oregon's rated, would mean, I think, that Lincoln Riley and USC maybe have arrived, and it might punch their college football playoff ticket. For Oregon here, the Ducks, it's a big game for Dan Lanning too. Not in the same way. I don't think they're under the same type of pressure, but Oregon's been doubted this year, and I don't like it, and I've made a video about it. I'll link that video down below in the pinned comment. It's talking about why Oregon's underestimated. This is a top 3, top 4, unanimously, power-rated team. There's a fly in my room. That's why I'm looking in my studio. That fly is honestly what people who doubt Oregon are to me. They're incredibly annoying. There's just this like buzzing in the background about how, well, Oregon lost Indiana, but we don't know if Indiana's good because blue chip ratio and logo, and they beat Penn State, but we don't know if Penn State's all that good because James Franklin got fired and they imploded after that game. Totally can't be that Oregon maybe mentally broke a top 10 Penn State team. They only beat Iowa by 2, and Iowa sucks because Iowa, they only beat Wisconsin by 14. Minnesota and Rutgers don't count. Same with the non-con and same with Northwestern. It's like that little fly, like this big, what this fly is. It's disappeared now. This big, juicy, loud fly that is just so annoying. It's like nails on the chalkboard. And it's not just that way to me and probably other college football people. It's also probably a bit annoying to Oregon internally. No matter what Oregon does, Oregon doesn't really get credit for what they have produced on the field and what they have produced in ratings. It's a big problem for a lot of these top-end Big Ten teams, even to a certain degree with USC. People don't take Lincoln Riley seriously. People think that Ohio State hasn't played anyone, and therefore they're like somehow absolute garbage. And people think that Indiana also hasn't played anyone, even though they beat this top 3 power-rated Oregon team. It's a problem with the Big Ten that has some credit to it, because with Penn State being bad, the scheduling in the Big Ten has been absolute garbage. The SEC does have tougher schedules, but at the same time, you got to look at the ratings and you got to look at the on-field product and the film and the dominance metrics and the points per drive and the points per play, and you will see that USC and Oregon, yes, but especially Oregon in that upper echelon with Indiana and Ohio State, are really good teams, guys. Do not underestimate these teams. That's why I love that College Game Day is coming here, because USC, when healthy and when they're able to hit their stride as a top 10 team, when Oregon is able to do that, they are clearly a top 5 team. So let me give you some evidence as to why that is. Oregon is top 7 in both points per play forced, so offensive points per play, and points per play allowed, defensive points per play. USC's 43rd on defense, but 5th on offense. And USC, in playing Notre Dame, Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa, they've actually played a pretty tough schedule, really. And to come out of that already with 8 wins, which is over their preseason win total of 7.5 before their final 2 games, is impressive. That is something that we aced in our preseason. Some other things, of course, we got wrong, but on College Football with Sam, we, as is said in the like and subscribe break that we insert in all of our videos, we hit the nail on the head more than we break our thumb with the hammer. That's what we do. We told you that preseason USC to flirt with the playoff was very likely. We even said them making the playoff is likely. With that loss to Illinois and then also a loss to Notre Dame that I thought was not going to happen, that kind of threw a wrench in the USC is likely to make the playoffs pick. But the over on the win total, which I thought by the summer was a lock to occur, has happened with 2 games left. And I imagine they'll at least beat UCLA if they do not win this game, a game where there is a path for USC to win despite being around a 2-score underdog at this point. For the Trojans, what I'm curious to see in this matchup is how their offensive line holds up against an Oregon defensive line that is not eye-popping statistically, but on film and even not just paying attention to the defensive lineman on film, but looking at your TV and just seeing how opposing quarterbacks and how the run game has to change in order to move the ball in this Oregon defense. This is the best defense that Lupoy and Lanning have ever had at Oregon by quite a big margin. And they are physical. They allow initial push at the lines of scrimmage. I've seen it against Indiana. We've seen it at times against Penn State. I saw it actually at times against Minnesota and definitely Iowa. But after about that initial 1 to 2 yards, and Iowa's offensive line is elite, so there's no shame in giving up that initial push from that O-line. After about 1 to 2 yards of push, nothing after that. You get nothing. And when you do, it's because Oregon misreads the play. Like, you did something they didn't expect. When all else is equal, and it's just physicality versus physicality, athleticism versus athleticism, player discipline versus player discipline, that defense will eat you alive, and they will beat you up. For USC, what can Justin Ta'anu, Alani Noah, J'Andre Reed, Elijah Page, Killian O'Connor, Tobias Raymond, what can they do for their quarterback and for their running back, King Miller? And we also got to see a little bit of Brian Jackson against Iowa, which is nice. What can they do for them? Because this Oregon defensive back group, too, talk about Ifiel Badegwu, Brandon Finney, Jayden Canady, Dylan Thieneman, Aaron Flowers, Peyton Woodyard, Kingston Lopa, Dalen Austin, Theron Johnson. It's a legit secondary. There's no paper tigerness to it. What they did against Penn State, what they were able to do against Rutgers, what they were able to do against Minnesota and Iowa. I know they don't have vaunted passing attacks, but even Indiana. Indiana has round 1, pick 1 at quarterback, possibly the best quarterback in America, elite college receivers who will be day 2 or day 3 picks on Sunday, an awesome offensive line when healthy, and the best coaching staff in America. And Oregon's secondary scored over 33% of Oregon's total points in that game. They were not the reason why Indiana won and Oregon lost. This channel will make you a college football expert and help you enjoy watching games and make more accurate predictions. So what are you waiting for? Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, comment your thoughts, and watch the video all the way through so that you can get the full package. And check the description and pinned comment for more ways to help yourself and this channel. So I think that you're going to need more than Jayden Maiava connecting with Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane for USC to win this game. If they're able to do that, but Oregon's able to get pressure and shut down the rushing attack, similar to what Notre Dame did, where Notre Dame couldn't really stop the passing attack, but they could shut down the rushing attack. And because Jayden Maiava isn't Caleb Williams, he isn't Baker Mayfield, he isn't Kyler Murray, when you get him to throw it enough times, especially on the road, he will make some mistakes. That was evident against Illinois too. Then I think Oregon will win, especially with what their rushing offense provides against a USC defense that is well coordinated and well coached, but just does not have the players necessary to be able to win games on their own against this type of Oregon team. They were never winning the game on their own against Notre Dame. They were always going to give up high 20s, low 30s. They just needed to get a few key stops and maybe a game-breaking turnover, and USC's offense needed to carry that team outside of that, and they couldn't. For Oregon, they're a more balanced team. Dante Moore, when he's protected, is awesome. Under pressure, different story. So USC needs to bring pressure somehow. Kenyon Sadiq is going to be healthy again. Pay attention to Oregon. Their offensive line, led by Iapani Laloulu, got Dave Iuli, Emmanuel Pregnon, Alex Harkey, I think, is back, and then also Isaiah World, the left tackle. It's a big, mean, physical offensive line. Former USC Trojan defensive tackle Bear Alexander, pay attention to him. Same with Tatum Tuioti, Mateo Uiagalelei, cornerbacks Brandon Finney and Ifiel Badegwu. And for USC, a few players to shut out on defense. Safeties Bishop Fitzgerald and Kamari Ramsey, if Ramsey's healthy. He's been in and out of a lot of games this year. Linebacker Eric Gentry, defensive end Anthony Lucas. Pay attention to those players. USC has a few players on defense that really have a strong impact. And it is a unit that, especially up front, is young. So Cameron Fountain, Jide Abasiri, Devin Tompkins, Desmond Steffens, much of their two deep there, are going to return, and he even got Jakeem Stewart, who recorded an interception against Iowa, off of a deflection. So those are some players to pay attention to in what is going to be a just monster game. Oregon only allows 4.9 opponent yards per play. That's first. And their strength of schedule per ESPN is 31st. That's tougher than Indiana's 38th and Ohio State's at 50th. There is a real chance in the playoffs because as of right now, it's Ohio State and I think Texas Tech that have the top two defenses. Include Indiana in there too. Like, those are the three. I'd have Ohio State 1. Don't quite know about Tech or Indiana. Oregon would be in that top 5 at either 4th or 5th. There's a chance that throughout the playoffs, with how Oregon's playing on defense, they could finish number 1. There's a chance there. That's how good they've performed. I thought they would improve defensively this year, but they have outperformed my expectations by so much that I'm not even going to say I was right on that fact. I was right about the direction, not even close to right about how good they were going to be. I did not think they'd be this good. For USC, they're 56th there. They're 4th, though, in yards per play on offense. Oregon is only 20th there. The QB matchup is fascinating because, on one hand, Dante Moore has more upside than Maiava, I believe, but he also has a much better supporting cast when healthy. He does not have Makai Lemon or Jacoby Lane, but his running back room is healthier. And more importantly, even when USC's running back room is healthy, at which point it's one of the best in America, the offensive line that Oregon has and their tight ends and also the defense to be able to give that offense a wider margin for error and to not put pressure on them is invaluable. It's amazing. Both passers have passer ratings in the 160s. Maiava leads America in QBR at a 90.7. Moore is a 72.5 QBR. It's 28th in college football. I'm curious to see how these staffs run these quarterbacks, if at all. I strongly believe, given what I've seen from Indiana against Oregon, where Mendoza not really on designed runs, but QB draws, and then Iowa with Gronowski, not for a lot of the game. Oregon defended him fairly well, but there were times where he was able to get loose, or like on that 4th and goal QB draw, get into the end zone, where he did just enough to help Iowa be in that game where, say, if they had Cade McNamara in that game, it probably would have been an Oregon blowout, even with all the issues they had. So how does USC utilize that? And then for Oregon, your rushing offense is already awesome as is. I know that USC is going to sell it to stop that because your rushing offense is far better than your passing offense, and their coaches know it. So, are you going to add in your quarterback there to pull the ball out? And that way, a defense that's already overwhelmed, that's already thin, that is far from where they want it to be, now has to think about one additional thing to stop. So there's a lot of possible options to use these quarterbacks to attack this defense. I think that is especially the case with Oregon. There's a lot more variability with what Dante Moore could do in this game than with what Jayden Maiava could do. Let's take a look at some keys to this game. We've already talked about this in an early preview, so we'll just go over these quickly. Rushing offense, havoc rate, so that's passes defended, pass breakups, interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, tackles for loss. That's what havoc plays are. Who does the best job at limiting those? Who does the best job at forcing those? USC's defense is better at creating havoc plays than Oregon's, but Oregon's outside of that is way better than USC on defense, and Oregon does a better job at stopping havoc plays than the Trojans do. For rushing offense, both are above 6 yards per carry, but Oregon's has been consistent for basically the entire season, even against tough fronts such as Wisconsin's or Iowa's. At times against Indiana, really against Indiana, either they got around 5 yards per carry or more, or IU gave them a TFL. And that's really good because no one can really run on Indiana. That is a strength of the Bryant Haynes defense they run, is you cannot run on them. If you beat them, you pick apart their zone, or you just out-athlete them at defensive back. That is how you beat Indiana's defense. Even against Penn State, outside of that long Singleton run, which was more on the safeties than the defensive line, they had to clean that up, and they didn't. They took bad angles. Outside of that run, they held Penn State to like 2 yards per carry, which is just insane. They held them to 2 yards per carry at home outside of that. Pass rush, who gets home? Who does a better job at protecting the quarterback? And then there are a few things that specifically relate to Oregon because Oregon's a favorite here. Oregon's at home. They're the higher power rated team. They're the more talented team. They are closer to where they want to be than USC is to where they want to be. So a lot rides here on Oregon. Oregon has more controllables than USC does. If USC wants to win, they're going to have to play closer to their ceiling than they usually have, and Oregon is going to not get close to their ceiling. They're going to have to not get close to that. If Oregon's pass defense is not legit, USC is live here, and Oregon is in trouble. Is it the best in college football? I don't know, but I don't think it's a paper tiger. I do believe it is a top 5 pass defense and could be the best. And there's also Oregon's health. If Oregon has, say, Evan Stewart is magically healthy enough to play, I imagine they'll hold him out until the college football playoff. Although you could redshirt him, and because you can play a guy in 4 games, and those are only regular season games, you only have 2 games remaining. So if he is healthy and ready to go, and you don't think he'll get re-injured, you could play him here, but I don't think they will. Nonetheless, if they can get Gary Bryant Jr. back and DeCorian Moore back, I think those guys are worth some points, given how thin Oregon's receiver room is. Typically, a wide receiver probably isn't worth a point or more unless they're Jeremiah Smith. But since Oregon's been so banged up there and they're so thin, having an additional receiver option, along with getting Sadiq back last week, is huge for this Oregon offense. I think, and I said earlier that I am leaning very strongly to one side. And I am. And as you can probably tell by the roster matchups on the screen, I am very much leaning in Oregon's direction. I've tried to, in this segment, be fair and objective to USC. I strongly believe I have. There is a slim chance for them to win, but it's slim. In no way, shape, or form is this number big enough. There is a massive discrepancy in the body types that Oregon has and the way those bodies are put in a position from their staff versus USC's body types and how USC wants to play ball and how that matches up with Oregon. So USC, they want to run the ball first and then play off of that. Well, Oregon doesn't give up the explosive runs that really help this USC offense get in rhythm. And what has USC's weakness been on defense, especially on the road? Like, toxically on the road. It becomes apparent within the first few drives that USC's defense has one beaming weakness. Like a massive prison spotlight flashing before your eyes. It's the run defense. Illinois ran all over them, and Illinois has struggled to run the ball. If Michigan has a healthy Haynes, they probably don't win. They may have lost while running for 200 or 300 yards. Against Notre Dame, they actually ran for 300. Nebraska with Emmett Johnson's really good. Their offensive line was also improving, but Nebraska was still able to run effectively even after Raiola went out. It became pretty obvious what they were doing. Iowa in that first half was dominating USC. Then they made adjustments. This is different. Oregon has the best lines of scrimmage play out of anyone they've played so far. And their secondary is way better than Notre Dame's. They do not have a Leonard Moore, though Brandon Finney might be close. He might actually be their Leonard Moore. But they have more than just one good DB out of their nickel package out of 5. They have 5 good defensive backs out of their 5, and a few of them are elite. They have a rushing offense that is proven in November to not just be good at getting explosives, but also good in power situations. And they have an elite tight end. So I believe that Oregon is going to win and cover, and I think they're going to dominate. I read this game pretty much like how I'm reading. It's not to the same degree. It's not. But I called my shot with Indiana over Illinois, And while I don't quite like this matchup as much as I do that one, it's close. I like this about as much as I like Texas Tech over BYU. I think it's going to be, you're going to know in the second quarter who's going to win. It's not going to be pretty. And Oregon, it's not just the roster matchups, it's the position. It's the fact that Oregon has an additional day of rest. It's the home field advantage. It's the idea that Oregon is deep enough to play these games close to their ceiling in November, and USC just doesn't have that yet. It's no disrespect to Lincoln Riley, no disrespect to USC at all. I think they're a good team. But Oregon is that much better. They're in a different tier. College game day's coming. That place is going to be rocking, and they're getting healthier. Moore played a good game against Minnesota. Maiava, I don't think, is playing to the same degree that he was earlier in the year. And another thing, too, Oregon's pass defense is legit. I think in a way that maybe no pass defense outside of maybe Nebraska's, but I don't think Nebraska's the talent that Oregon does in pass defense. Like, there is one pass defense in the Big Ten I'm pretty confident is better than Nebraska's. Two of them, actually. Those would be Ohio State and Oregon. Probably Indiana, too. But from a talent perspective, I know Oregon and Ohio State. Maiava didn't even complete 40% of his passes against Nebraska on the road. Now, tie that with the fact that they also didn't run well in that game on the road, and that was against a Nebraska defense that can't stop the run. Now imagine, and that was off a bye too. Now imagine coming off a physical game against Iowa where it takes 60 minutes to beat them, all out effort. And now you have to go on the road to a team with an extra day of rest, who played an inferior opponent, got to substitute in backups, is not going to be as tired as you. They're already deeper than you. They're better coached. They have better recruiting. It is proven, not saying this is going to be the case under the new regime, but Riley's new regime is new. It's newer and fresher than Lanning's because of all the changes he made. So far, Lanning's Oregon has developed better than Riley's USC. There's just so much that goes in Oregon's favor here that I think this is going to be a blowout. It's going to be bad. Oregon, it could be 10.5, it could be 11.5, it could be 12, it could be 13, it could be 14. You can keep ratcheting up the number, and I think that Oregon here will name the score. Don't know how big the blowout will be, because Oregon, same thing with Indiana, same thing with Ohio State, with a lot of teams, they call off the dogs once it gets to a certain point. But this is going to be bad. This will be not quite Indiana over Illinois, though there is a slim potential of that happening if Oregon clicks in every way and USC falls apart. But it's up there with those shots that I called, with Texas Tech over BYU, which we aced, with Indiana over Illinois, which we aced. If you want to find any comfort in this as a USC fan, I did not call Penn State to blow out Oregon, but I thought they would win by 2 scores, and instead it was Oregon that should have won by 2 scores. But in my blowout shot calls, we're 2-0 so far. I'm pretty confident in this one happening. And as for the Big Ten standings and what that means, this is a game where the winner is going to the college football playoff, especially if they're Oregon. The loser, if they're USC, is staying home. If you're Oregon, the Washington game becomes a must-win. If you somehow lose, the winner of this game will likely win out, and at that point, you root for Michigan to beat Ohio State, and then the winner of this game gets to go to Indianapolis, as long as, well, actually, I think they go even if Michigan beats Ohio State, but say loses to Maryland, because their combined conference, well, it depends. If Michigan loses to Maryland, beats Ohio State, and you got USC and Ohio State, USC beat Illinois, so the win percentage versus common opponents triggers, and then Ohio State goes to Indy. It's very complicated. These new tiebreakers are very complicated. That's why we love them. But I think that if Michigan beats Ohio State, they're probably going to beat Maryland too. Could be wrong on that front. So the winner of this game is a shot to go to Indy. They're definitely in the college football playoff, because if USC wins this game, I don't think they lose to UCLA. Oregon wins this game. Even if they lose, I don't think they're going to lose to Washington. I think Oregon's going to, at minimum, same with USC, split these next two games. I'm just of the conviction that Oregon will dominate USC and they will win in a pretty massive blowout. And at that point, I hope people will take recognition of what Oregon is and who they are, but we'll have to see. They might just excuse it away saying that USC isn't all that good, even though they could have won that game against Notre Dame, could have easily won that game against Illinois, and there is a world where they're actually 8-0, but 10-0 entering this game and undefeated. Thank you for watching. It's my mission on College Football with Sam to make you the most informed, knowledgeable, and entertained fan as possible. We aren't perfect, but we hit the nail on the head more often than we hit our thumb with the hammer. Make sure to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, comment, and if you're here, you've probably already watched the whole video. So thank you for doing those things.